we had to rebuild a brand new identity. We had to start to bifurcate Kobe, the guy off the court and the one on the court. And then the Black Mamba actually never got created for a few months, because just like anything, some people, they get their alter ego right away because they already had a source of inspiration. But Kobe's was finally inspired when he watched Kill Bill.
Hey, what's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here with another episode of the Smart Agency Masterclass, a podcast for the agency owner that wants to scale and grow faster and hear amazing stories. And on today's episode, I have my personal coach and the person behind so many big successes and reaching your peak performance, like names like Kobe Bryant, that small basketball player you might have heard of. We're going to talk about the Black Mamba. We're going to talk about a lot of the amazing things that he's helped people do, from Olympic athletes to professional athletes and the top business peoples in the world. So let's go ahead and jump into the episode. Hey, Todd, welcome to the show.
Swanker, it's great to be here.
Yeah, man. I'm honored to come on, to have you come on the show. Now, you're the man, the myth behind a lot of different people, and you're very a humble person, so you hardly ever talk about it, which I think that's why you coach me, because I like the humble people, not all the people out there. So for the people that have not heard of you, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I got my start accidentally in 1997. I say accidentally because a lot of people talk about like entrepreneurial journeys as if it was like a choice. Mine wasn't. I happened to be good at coaching some high school football players, and my kind of secret sauce was helping them more with their mental game stuff. And then one of the parents asked me one day, would I mentor her son? And I said, yeah, sure. For me, it was like just a chance to talk sports more with a kid that I liked. And she was like, okay, well, how much do you want to charge? And I was just going to do it for free. And I was like on the spot. I still remember this so clearly. I was like,
was it $500?
No, it was so much less. I was so insecure about the number. I thought I was like totally overreaching. I said $75 for a package of 3 sessions. In-home visits, by the way, an hour long.
Oh my God, you lost money on gas.
Yeah. So on that, I made, when I did my quick in taxes at the end of 2017, 18 and 19, because I didn't change my rates for 3 years, or 2.5 years. I made $8.56 an hour. That was my average profit. Again, you're right. My gas money just churned it all up. I say that because I still I loved that time, man. And by the way, hey, when you're that cheap, and you can talk about those agency people, gives you lots of reps. And that's what you need early on. Like that, going back to like that humility thing that you were kind of mentioning earlier. So many people want to posture and, pose nowadays. And it's a thing that like kind of can get under my craw a little bit. So anyways, that's where I started, was young athletes. I'm a big believer in mentorship and apprenticeship. So I reached out to the giant of the mental game industry, this guy, Harvey Dorfman, known as the Yoda of baseball, and talked my way into coming down and spending time with him in North Carolina, where he was during the baseball off season. And then he kind of brought me behind the scenes of like, this is what it's like to work with the pros, like Roger Clemens, Andy Pettit, and guys like that. I got to sit on in some sessions with him. And that started my whole peak world, like move into the world of peak performance and mental game coaching, and ended up selling that company in 2014 to Real Madrid, and built another company along that way as well, which I sold to Chevron, which was a leadership and performance company. So long story short, I've been in this kind of world of like working with, elite human beings, and top level talent in Hollywood, Broadway, sports, business, like you. And, I sort of think about when I'm trying to help someone reach whatever mountain they're trying to conquer, which is typically you. I think of, I'm twisting the dial of the inner game, the strategic game, and then the execution game. Those are my 3 kind of circle Venn diagram that I kind of operate inside of. And I try to build programs and systems and stuff to help make that happen.
And what I really like about what you do is you kind of sit back and diagnose rather than prescribe right away with a lot of people. Is that what you saw when you started working with your mentor, when he was working with like Roger Clemens and all these professional athletes? Did he kind of sit back and go, tell me what you want and what's happening? Or how did that work? What did you learn from him?
In some ways, yes, but in most ways, no. And that was because he already had deep relationships with them. So he was kind of past that diagnostic phase with them early on. What my greatest takeaway from Harvey really was, I don't need to act a certain way in order to deliver value to other people. And because at that time I was very young. I was only 24 going into 25, operating this sort of mental game space, which is, it wasn't really an industry. It wasn't even a market. It wasn't even a niche at the time. Coaching wasn't a thing back then, let alone mental game coaching. It was at a very, very high level, but not at the levels that I was playing at, which was, amateur sport. I didn't break into the pros really yet. And, but Harvey would, he'd call them, stop being such a little bitch, and this is him. I was like, oh, like when he said that, I won't say who he said it to, but he's like, I'm going to get sick from all of your complaining. Like, get me that trash can. I feel like I'm going to puke. You make me want to puke. And, like, stop being such a little bitch. And, these things wouldn't be popular today, but, cancel culture can, read my middle finger basically on that. But the thing was about him is that was Harvey. He swore like a trucker. He was very much a challenger personality with his clients. But at the same time, he could morph into very gentle, patient, and kind when he needed to, based on your kind of what you needed in that moment. So that was my greatest takeaway from Harvey. And I was like, oh, wait, I don't need to like gloss over myself. Like professionalism doesn't have to appear a certain way. And it's crazy because 5 years later, I was sitting inside of a boardroom at Chevron, and one of the presidents came up to me afterwards. All these like different leaders had just left the room, and he sat down with me. Ken, I'll never forget you for saying this to me, but he's like, Todd, you don't realize what your superpower is. And I was like, no, maybe I don't. And he's like, we just had a head of geology, geoscience, geophysics, reservoir engineering, like really smart guys in the room, and women as well, leave. And every single one of them likes you. You have an ability to create familiarity with people. That's a superpower. And I was like, I'm such a people person. I just think everyone's friendly because I'm friendly too. And he was like, no, if I could bottle it and just give it to all of our people, that would be amazing. So going back to then Harvey, his just familiarity, he spoke in a vernacular that you and I appreciate, like we don't want to posture with big words and $10,000 phrases and stuff. So that was my greatest takeaway from him. So when you say like diagnostic, he would have very much been that way early on. I didn't list sessions that he did with people because these were his kind of like crew that came in and made their annual pilgrimage to come see him every year.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Let's talk about, how did you work with Kobe Bryant, and talk about kind of you helping him develop the Black Mamba? Because I think that relates. You were telling me that story or I think a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, man, that can relate to anybody, like how you have to have, and I won't kind of give anything away. So let's talk about that.
So Kobe was going through that sexual assault trial in 2003. And he actually reached out to my mentor, Harvey. He didn't reach out to me originally. He reached out to Harvey, and through a friend of his. And Harvey, after talking to him, and the way that Kobe said it was, I feel like I'm losing my edge. And Harvey said to him, no, you're not losing your edge. You're having an ego death, and which is an identity challenge. And a guy that I've been mentoring for a few years now, this is literally what he specializes in now, because I really focus on performance at the identity level, because when you change the identity of a human being, all those beliefs, attitudes, habits, behaviors are all stacked on top of identity. So when someone adopts a new identity, they actually take with them their idea of what the habits, attitudes, beliefs are of that identity along with them. And there's tons of different science behind this stuff. So that's how I got connected with Kobe, and exactly what Harvey had said is true. And those were actually my words, by the way. I mean, Harvey's brilliant, but because at the time we were doing mentoring and we would always touch base with each other. And I just said, hey, I think there's this interesting thing that when an athlete is coming up against a brand new world that they need to step into, it's the college athlete going to pros. There is this thing that they need to shed to step into something else. And the longer it takes you to do that, the greater the chances are that you're going to create a lot of conflict for yourself in that new area, or the greater the chances you're never going to make it in that area. And so that's where I had started working with Kobe on working on his identity. He was going through this phase where he was now losing this innocence that he had coming into the league. He was a high school athlete coming in. He's kind of able to use that persona of the innocent kid for about 5-6 years. And now all of a sudden, this veneer that he had around him of this like pure innocence, well, now you're in an assault trial, whatever the facts are, and he lost that. So that's what he was actually dealing with on the inside. And he felt like going out onto that court this year, because it was about a week out from the fall training camp. And he just felt like he was going to get crushed out there. And so we had to rebuild a brand new identity. We had to start to bifurcate Kobe, the guy off the court and the one on the court. And then the Black Mamba actually never got created for a few months, because just like anything, some people, they get their alter ego right away because they already had a source of inspiration. But Kobe's was finally inspired when he watched Kill Bill. And what really, and this is, you'd only get this if it was behind the scenes. He looked at the Black Mamba scene in Kill Bill, and he finally found the equal sign from the stuff that him and I were talking about, which was we had already developed what are the character traits and abilities that you want to have when you're out there, like an absolute stone cold killer, someone who's just never quits, the resiliency side of things. There was 3 main attributes. And then he saw it finally in a physical manifestation of a character. And that's where the two joined. Even my wife said to me the other day, she said, Todd, how important is it? She was talking about this new alter ego. She's like, how important is it that I have a name for it? I'm like, well, if you want it to be successful, you don't need a name for it, but if you want it to be successful, give it a name.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I love that. And Deion Sanders has that. He created that. He was probably one of the first, if you think it, because I remember one of my professors at Florida State played baseball with Deion. And he said he was the most quiet kid. But then when the cameras would come on, he goes, it's prime time. And that's where it all started.
Yeah. And again, like when these athletes are explaining it, they're never going to go into real detail. You and I talked about this when we were chatting a couple of weeks ago. They're never going to stand at the podium or sit at the podium and explain everything that's going on between the 6 inches of their ears, because it would make them seem crazy to the average person. And that's kind of like the place that I like to sit in, is because I've been able to work with just not only the elite, but like legends in their sports. And then I see the content that goes out into the masses of people, or the different paradigms and principles that are kind of pushed out to people. And people say, if you want to be great, you need to do that. I just think it's funny, because that will never get you to that status level. Like you don't have to be Kobe, or you don't have to be Rafael Nadal or Cristiano Ronaldo. But if you do want to, you better unshackle from a lot of the really crappy paradigms that people share on, especially social media nowadays, because they will never get you there. Never get you there. There's an attitude they have that is way different than the average, or even people who are pros in their sport.
Yeah. I find that really interesting. Let's drill down more into that. Like, how can, like, we're talking pretty high level of like, this is how you kind of like, Kobe created an alter ego, or like you were telling me, Bo Jackson created his alter ego from watching Friday the 13th, or
Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th. Yeah.
Crazy, right? Like just stone cold. How can someone get more granular and find theirs so they can reach their peak performance? Because everyone's different. Like when you were telling me the Kobe story, and I think I don't want anybody to fall in this trap, because I even went to you. I go, well, Todd, tell me more, man. How can I be the Black Mamba? And then I started thinking, and we started talking. I was like, do you really want to be the Black Mamba? No, man.
Yeah.
I like my lifestyle. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, that's why we look for these sources of inspiration, but we're not trying to model exactly that person's life. Like if someone actually, and there are many people who use Kobe Bryant or the Mamba as their source code for their alter ego. But it's really what we're inspired by is the traits or the attributes or the qualities that are there. And we still have to customize it towards our own current ambitions that we have. And this kind of goes back to your diagnostic, being very honest and real about what it is that we want. So I would say that most people that are even listening to this now, and I'm not pointing a finger at you through your audio device, but there's a lot of people who don't know how to articulate what it is they actually want. They won't admit it to themselves. And so when you said it, you're like, okay, how can I bring my Black Mamba? And I'm like, just diagnostically, what I know about you, I don't think you want to force yourself into that world that Kobe was in. He was trying to attempt to do something different. Not different isn't better, just different. So going back to finding that alter ego, there's one of two ways. There's not the only two ways, but I'd say, well, first, Kobe, we didn't build a Black Mamba that encapsulated his entire life. That wasn't it. The Black Mamba didn't go everywhere on all of his fields of play in every single role that he had. It was one, and it actually had a very express purpose, right? He was going through a trial and a tribulation, right? Or a trial at the time. And so that was a forcing function to make it happen. That's one of the biggest reasons why someone might adopt something like this. But it's for a specific role. And so when you think about the roles that you have in your life, which one is giving you the most challenge, struggle? Which one are you resisting against the most? Which one do you feel most trapped by? Like, man, like I'm an agency owner right now, but I really want to share more content or get myself out there more. And that means that kind of what's happening is you might be resisting against the promoter side of this, and promoter not in P.T. Barnum, but promoter in that the message is buried. And so that's one. And then the second one would be, what's an area of your life you want to be more playful with, that you kind of either you're taking it too seriously, you're trying to evolve in. And so where could you be more playful? Because at the core of this idea, and this is what Kobe did great, is there has to be an attitude of playfulness, because that's what it plays with, is your creative imagination. So that's where I would just say start. It doesn't have to be agency owner. It doesn't have to be CEO. It doesn't have to be promoter. It could be dad, could be mom, could be something else, athlete, because you're resisting against not taking care of your body. Well, I go, well, who could I hire as my source code of inspiration to now craft this body into something that's powerful and lean or flexible and adaptable, whatever it might be?
I like that you said source code, right? Because and everyone can kind of change their source code, but you always take bits and pieces and then create it as your own. I also like that, and you always mention we have multiple identities, kind of like there's the Black Mamba when he's on the court, destroying everybody. That there are also Kobe Bryant as the writer, Kobe Bryant as the husband, the father, right? Yeah. And I really relate to this because when I sold my agency, that was my whole identity. Now, I was a father and a husband at this time, but when I sold, I was completely depressed. And all I associated myself with is the only thing I knew in the world to do, I just sold. And I felt like I sold my soul. And you were even mentioning, you were telling me a real interesting story of the boss. I can't remember his real name, right?
Yeah, and Brian Boss.
Yeah, tell that story a little bit, because I think that relates to a lot of agency owners. The only thing we relate to is being an agency owner, and I want you all to be fixed as much as we can be
fixed. Like Jason, before I go to the boss, it's we as human beings, we love to attach labels to ourselves and label others. And we do that because once we label something, we can organize it and put it on the shelf in our head. So like Jason is my coach, or Jason is my friend, or et cetera. And so we attach a label of, so this agency owner says, I am an entrepreneur. And it's one of the things I'd said to you is, if you would have switched it and said, I am entrepreneurial. So that's one of the things I like to try to guide people with is there's times where those labels can be very empowering, but when we're about to make a shift and a change, if that athlete doesn't change the narrative of himself that, no, I'm an NFL player, and I don't change it with them to, no, you're athletic. Because you don't need to take that away from yourself. The retirement doesn't take your athleticism away from you, that verb away from you. So I like to give people the idea that we're more verbs than we are nouns. And so just to help out that agency owner kind of think about, like, because if you're entrepreneurial and then your agency did get sold or it did plummet and you had to go and get a job somewhere else, you're not losing your identity, because you can take your entrepreneurial nature anywhere. That's not being taken from you.
I love that.
So,
yeah, I always related to myself as entrepreneurial and creative, and I could take that anywhere.
Anywhere. Yeah. So what I was going to say about, or when you were asking about with Brian Bosworth. So Brian Bosworth, legendary linebacker coming out of Oklahoma, and he had this phenomenal persona called the Boz. And Boz crazy, he had crazy haircuts, his, powder blonde hair, went to Seattle. And he was someone who took on this persona and never shut it off. And even his wife in a documentary talked about how she hated the Boz. Like, she hates when that guy comes out, because she also knows the other parts of Brian. And in an interview, he was talking about how he'd be sitting in, say, like a cafeteria or a diner in Norman, Oklahoma, and someone would come up to him and say, Boz, and then he would immediately just switch on and into that guy and, engage with the, fan. And I said, if I was coaching him, what I would do is give him the language to turn to that person and say, oh, you're looking for the Boz. Yeah, he comes out 1:00 on Saturday against Texas. Are you going to be there? So, and you can understand that language, right? Like, again, he's Brian in the moment, or he's Brian public with the moment. He doesn't have to be the same guy. He can have another version of himself that does interact with people, and that's still honoring. There's another side of him that might be with his family, because we all do have that. Like, you've had it where you've come off stage and you've just spoken, but the person who comes up to you and says, oh my God, I loved what you just said, like that framework that you just shared, or that story that you just shared, I did the exact same thing. Are you going to be the exact same as the speaker, or is it going to be a slightly less elevated and different kind of public interaction? Yep. And then when you're working with your team, it's different. Of course. And so what I like to try to give people as tools is understand that intentionality with your identity is a superpower. Like, when you know who is going to be showing up and you're custom building the traits and qualities and attributes for how you want to show up in that role so that it can deliver the greatest performance, which just means allows you to get the best result that you need for that particular field of play. That's not being fake. That's you being the most real person in that fucking room.
Yeah, I love it. And it kind of goes to my next question, is around kind of uniforms, or kind of maybe priming ourselves. Like you were mentioning, and I was watching this interview where you were talking about these kids that were trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle.
Yeah.
Right. And seeing how long it took them to give up. Then I'll let you kind of take it over from there, because it's really pretty fascinating.
So it was great research that was done at the University of Minnesota. This lady, the story that I had originally heard was a lady who had been through and saw one of my sports performance talks talking about alter egos in Georgia, was friends with this lady, and she kind of shared this whole alter ego stuff. And she kind of fell down this cool rabbit hole of understanding it more. But she devised this little study where she brought a bunch of grade 1 and 2 students into a room, and they had this puzzle box that had all these padlocks on it. And each kid was given a set of keys, and they were supposed to unlock the padlocks as quickly as they possibly could. The reality is none of the keys would work in any of the padlocks. And what they were trying to test for was resiliency and whether it could change based on if a kid was wearing a uniform or not. So they bring in the first group of kids. They're just in their plain clothes, give them the keys, they do it, and then they record the results. And then they brought in a second group of kids along with a rack of costumes, Dora the Explorer and Batman costumes to be specific. And they said, pick your favorite one, put it on, not like look at them, put it on. And then they gave them the keys, described what they needed to do. And their keys didn't work either. There was no difference in the keys. And then they recorded again their resiliency. How long did they stick this thing out? Well, the surprising part that they didn't expect was how their vocalized self-talk changed. So the kids that were in their own clothes would say things like, oh, I'm not good at puzzles. This is too hard. I can't figure this out. The kids that were now in Batman or Dora the Explorer costumes would say things like, if Batman could do it, I can do it. Dora the Explorer always finds a way, so I'll find a way, right? So they had now adopted the identity of these two characters, and it was changing their behavior. It wasn't changing a result, though. It was changing the experience of this activity. Well, the reality was they stuck with it for far longer than the kids who were in their plain clothes. So their resiliency went way up. Their vocalized self-talk went way up, which means that this uniform was sort of protecting in some ways their own sort of sense of self, right? Because when they say, if Batman can do it, I could do it. If Dora the Explorer always finds a way, I can find a way. These other kids had no veneer there to protect their own identity. So they would say, oh, I can't figure this out. And they just quit. Because what happens if I continue on and I can't figure it out? That's me indicting my own inabilities in this activity. And so that's why I go to like all these just terrible ideas that trap so many people in popular culture nowadays about authenticity, authentic self, being fake. And I'm like, okay, best of luck, because you don't have great tools to navigate life very well. And are either of those kids being inauthentic, by the way? No, because in that moment, that was their experience of their self.
Yeah.
So it's just a powerful tool.
It is. And is music a tool as well? Because I remember before every tennis match in college, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, I would play the Rocky soundtrack. And when I would always picture him hitting the meat and just like going through anything. And I literally would like hit the fence, and I would just crush everybody. Could music be a tool like this as well?
Yeah, it's funny. I just recorded a video that's coming out soon about Kobe and music. And, with him, what I tell people is when you're choosing your music, ask yourself, is this the music of my identity? So the thing that he would listen to in some of his games would be the theme song to Halloween, because kind of like Bo Jackson choosing Jason Voorhees as his alter ego, he was adopting some of the characteristics and traits of Michael from Halloween.
Like emotionless?
Emotionless. And he would just play it on a loop inside. And again, that's an example of the music reinforcing the attributes and traits. Unemotional. Snakes are unemotional. Jason Voorhees, unemotional. That was actually the biggest reason why Bo Jackson chose Jason Voorhees, is because he was getting in trouble when he was younger with being too emotional out there and being uncoachable. He still wanted to destroy everything that was in his path, but now he wanted to do it without any emotion. And when he saw Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, he was like, aha, that's exactly what I need. Not the serial killer thing. It's the unemotional part. So to your point about music, absolutely. It's one of, I would say, the big 5 things that we would use as a way of getting ourselves into that performance state of mind.
Yeah, I love that. In wrapping up, I noticed on the website you mentioned I coach, I build, I write, I speak. Tell us a little bit more about why specifically you kind of do it that way.
Well, for one thing, those are all verbs, right? So I coach, that's a verb. I build is a verb, and so forth. But it's actually the pathway how I think really good stuff gets created. And that is, I coach with people one-on-one still. I might have group coaching programs and things, but I coach. And I think if you want to, this is my problem with maybe agency owners, and not a problem, but I think maybe just to encourage them, you guys and girls are executing everyday marketing strategy. There's a lot of people who write best-selling books talking about pie-eyed, ideas, but they're not on the field of play. You're on the field of play. We need more people who are on the field of play pushing out good content, being rabble rousers and apple cart dumpers and stuff like that. So I coach, and from that coaching and being on the field with top level talent in all these different fields, then I build something. I build a program, because I can take all these like nuance and okay, well, now how can I build it into a program, a system, a model, a method that more people can leverage, not just the people who I'm coaching with one-on-one. And then from that interaction, lots of people interacting with it, that refines it. It makes it better, because you're always making assumptions. Once you're going from one to many people, there's assumptions that are being made. So I don't write a book first. Where's the value in that?
Well, there's lots of people that write a book first.
Well, I know, but I don't read those books.
I know, that's exactly
so I coach,
right.
I build, then I write, because it's been battle tested with hundreds and thousands or tens of thousands of people. Alter Ego Effect, the book, was written or came out in 2019. I developed the method and became known for it in 2003. Really, January of that year is when I really kind of cracked the code on it. But I waited 16 years to get that book out. And then I speak on it. So I coach, I build is the like nuancing part of it. Writing and speaking on it is now getting it out there to more masses of people. So that's how I think about my process.
It's awesome. Well, this has been amazing, Todd. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would benefit the listeners listening in?
Well, I know that because you work with so many agency people, one of the biggest challenges is that delivery and fulfillment side of working with clients, whether it's the resistance from the client side of not logging into your Basecamp or not logging into your ClickUp or like whatever project management system that you're working on. And it's not a pitch, but going back to the building side of things, I'm now building out a software company called UpCoach, and it's the platform that would have made the scaling and growing of my coaching business a lot simpler and easier, and giving a better client experience for people as well. So they're not communicating me on a bunch of different platforms or, trying to grab content and coursework or downloads from over here and communicating here or something like that. And I say it because one of the fastest growing niches inside of UpCoach is actually marketing agencies and agencies, because we do have project management. It's not as robust as some of the other platforms, but it's the just enough. But then you can also create just a custom program for you to engage with your clients, deliver assets. And we're getting this big switch over because a big agency person managed to buy it for a group coaching program that he's doing, and then decided, well, wait a second, what if we started using this with our agency people? And yeah, so it's it's an interesting niche that I would have never guessed that would come in. But now, because we have all the features that consultants and agency people need, that would be the only thing I would add to help, your
Perfect.
crew.
Awesome. Well, make sure everyone goes check that out. Also, please get a copy of Alter Ego. I know Todd's personal goal is to have a copy in everybody's hands. So make sure you guys go check that out at all the major resources. And if you guys enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more amazing agency owners and really be able to attract the most ideal clients, I want all of you to go check out agencymastery360.com/attract. This is a free masterclass on attracting your perfect clients. I'm going to reveal a lot of secret stuff I've never told anybody before. So make sure you go there now. And until next time, have a swank day.